James Pascal, let me start with you. I mean, I would have thought there's an overwhelming majority of people who think that these parents, and it's more men than women, but it does cover both, but particularly men, should live up to their responsibilities. Don't think anybody would argue with that. But it's the manner in which the government's going about it, in that, as Lord Carlisle, who's paid to look after human rights and by the government, revoking passports is a judicial function, not an administrative function. What do you say to that?
What about children's rights? I mean, what we're talking about here is support for children, and they must come first in all of this. Now, unfortunately, there are some dads who will go to any length to avoid paying for their responsibility towards their children, any length. And I think we've come to the conclusion that the present system in respect to driving licences, because that's a power we've already got, you go through the courts first. It's a very expensive process. It's quite laborious.
But are you comfortable with giving this power to a civil servant?
Yes, because...
An administrative power?
I am, because the system includes the right to appeal, and that's very important. And it's important to understand that the agency or the commissioner will not rush to do this. This is a final sanction after lots of other things have been tried, and we have to be satisfied that there is willful efforts by the parent not to pay. Then the parent is notified, we are about to take action to remove your driving licence or passport. They've got 7 days to consider it. If they have a reason for thinking you shouldn't do it, there's the right of appeal in there. So it's got all the right reservations in. It's not heavy-handed. I think we're respecting the father's rights, but the reason we're strengthening the powers is because we're acting on behalf of the children, and they must come first.
Theresa May, where are you on this?
Well, I think, similarly, as you say, Andrew, we're all agreed that we want to make the absent parents actually live up to their responsibilities and pay where they're being required to pay. What I certainly want to be pressing the government on is some of the details within this. I think it's right, there has to be an appeal mechanism which should kick in immediately, so that, and the order should not go ahead, obviously, if somebody has appealed it.
And this would be an appeal to the courts?
Appeal to the courts, that's the crucial thing. So it then becomes not, if you like, an administrative process. It then goes back to becoming a judicial process and has that judicial oversight.
Wouldn't everybody appeal?
Well, I suspect everybody will appeal. And there's another aspect. Yes, there's an aspect to this, which is actually what is the practical impact of this going to be? Because there are lots of caveats about not taking the driving licence away, for example, from an absent parent who needs their driving licence to be able to get to work. Because if they can't get to work, they can't get the money to pay the child maintenance.
Why don't you just deduct the money from their bank account?
Well, in some cases, then there is an earnings order put in place which takes money from the salary. It's the money that kids need, not the lack of a passport. Why is it taken so long? And this is not a party issue, because the Tories tried to do this as well with a support agency, which became a laughingstock and remains so under your government as well. Why is it so difficult to implement what is quite a simple principle, that if you bring children into this world, you have a responsibility towards them until they grow up? Why has it proved so difficult to make that real?
You would think it was a simple, but in fact there is no government anywhere in the world that has completely cracked this, because at the bottom of this problem you've got parents who are absolutely determined not to face up to their responsibilities. Now, the agency has in fact improved. We've put a lot more money into it. We've given it more powers. It's now collecting over £1 billion of maintenance a year. That's a record. It's getting money through to 200,000 more children than it was 3 years ago. It is improving, but this is always a difficult area. It's always a challenge. You've got to keep reviewing the powers, and I think this is an additional extra power. It's also important to bear in mind, it's often the threat of this coming down the line at a parent that makes them pay.
Or go on the run.
Well, some, of course, go abroad. That's another whole issue.
Or go on the run, not even, they just...
Well, yes,
that's what happens in the United States, across the state border.
Or here
What's
they
your
go
view
abroad.
on this?
Well, it sounds to me like huge administrative costs, and I'm not sure necessarily that you're going to achieve the aims, and also, punitive measures against probably the majority of people. You're talking about harassing poor people, about distributing their money more fairly. No. That's essentially because anyone who's got money hires lawyers. And
but whether they're poor or not isn't the issue. They have responsibilities.
Indeed,
they can't keep on having kids and sending the bill to the rest of us.
Yeah. Right, indeed. But Kim Fellowes' point was that the majority of these cases, that's what she just said, wasn't it? The majority of these cases end up being inaccurate. I mean...
That's a matter of competence.
Yes, so this is what happened,
what do you say to
with the CSA. Over and over again, the cases turned out to be false. What you will do, possibly, is create vast numbers of martyrs. who will say, I was traduced by this court, by this system, how dare you do this to me? And then the papers will be full of cases.
Theresa May.
Well, one of the issues that Kim raised, I think, is an important one, which is about at what level will this decision be taken within the child maintenance agency.
It could be quite junior.
I mean, well, I don't think it should be quite junior, frankly. It should be taken at a fairly senior level, because this is a punitive measure. But it's absolutely right, as Michael says, that we have seen over the years of the Child Support Agency, and both parties have been struggling with this issue of how to make this actually work. We have seen, and I know from my own constituency, people who come in who, on both sides, you know, the absent parent who feels that the agency has made mistakes in their decisions about how much they should be paying.
Very often it's the woman who's left.
Well, likewise, the
literally
woman who's
holding
left,
the baby.
that's right, who's not getting the maintenance payment and who can see that, you know, perhaps a former partner seems to be doing very well, thank you, and she's left struggling.
The best examples I've seen were solved through mediation. In the end, that's how it was solved.
But I think the point that James is making, mediation, there is just a hard core where mediation isn't going to work, because, as you say, they're determined to avoid paying anything.
And they're often actually very wealthy. Some of these ones who really escape from it. That's my experience.
Well, I mean, no fans of the change yet. This is from Alison in Worthing. If a driving licence and/or passport were taken away, the person concerned couldn't undertake their line of work, then how on earth are they going to get any payments from them? There wouldn't be any income from which to take payments. It's ridiculous. It's just hot air.
But if they made the payments,
then they wouldn't have
they wouldn't lose their passport.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
nonsense. Ian Ross from Chessington says, does this government not realise that some absent fathers are made absent by the mothers? Additionally, isn't taking a passport and driving licence away going to make it harder to find employment if you're unemployed, as I am? Another example of Labour communism. Do as we say or face the consequences. I'll let you come back on Labour communism.
Where would you like to start?
Yes.
I come back to where I started. This is about children first, and where partnerships break down, the relationship may end, but the responsibility doesn't. And the state has to act here on behalf of the child, who doesn't have the right to, doesn't have the ability to do all this, and go after. I mean, look, most parents face up to their responsibility.
Sure.
We only have to have this system because there are some determined not to.
And you're going to support this, and I would get the impression.
But we have overall support
of
the welfare reform bill. I think when we get into the committee stage, we're going to be looking at this in very great detail. And there's another aspect, Andrew, which is actually there are lots of caveats about if you need your driving licence to get to work, then actually it won't be taken away from you. So there's a real question about actually what impact is it going to have.
If you've got a driving licence and you're going to work, you should be able to afford to pay some of the benefit.
Exactly.
Anyway, we've done it. Sorry, Michael.
I was going to say the point that one of the fathers made there about the absent father. If the father doesn't want to be as absent as the courts determine him to be so, then of course he's resentful that he's having to pay money for a job that he says he could do, which is to look after the children more.
Sure.
That is where one of the key areas
it's a matter of custody.
Exactly. If the father, it's not called that anymore, but yes, indeed.